Today is the sixth day of Chodesh Shvat, and we are Be'ezrim Mizbarach learning Daf Tzadi Vav Amud Aleph of Maseches Pesachim. We are already a few lines down in the Amud. It is a chunky Amud, so we still have a good amount to learn through of the sugya that begins with the Mishnah. The Mishnah is some maybe 14 lines down from the top of the Amud. The Mishnah says, Ma bin Pesach Mitzrayim to Pesach Daris. This, of course, is all of the parashas, all of the psukim that we learned, that we read in this past week's parashas by the end of parashas by, all of the halachas of Karban Pesach, of Pesach Mitzrayim. And just as a general overview, there is Pesach Mitzrayim, which is the Karban Pesach that was offered in Mitzrayim, and then there's Pesach Daris, which is the Karban Pesach that is going to be offered for all future generations, and there are significant differences between those obligations of Pesach Mitzrayim and Pesach Daris, which are going to be delineated in the Mishnah, and then are going to be challenged in the Gemara. The Gemara is going to be figuring out what exactly the differences are, and if the Mishnah has missed out any of them, trying to learn all of those things from the Psukim. Says the Mishnah as follows: Ma bin Pesach Mitzrayim to Pesach Daris. What is the difference between the Pesach that was offered in Mitzrayim and the Pesach for all generations? Pesach Mitzrayim, the first Pesach, the Pesach Mitzrayim, Michai Ba'asar. The Pasuk tells us that they have to take the Karban Pesach, that to choose their sheep on the 10th day of the month of Nisan. V'tan hazah ba'agudas Esav. And it needed to have sprinkling of the blood done with a bundle of Esav, which that is hyssop. The modern translation of that is zatar. That's zatar that people use as a spice. So that is Esav, that's hyssop. It had to be ba'agudas Esav. Va'al hamashkav, it had to be on the little mezuzahs on the two doorposts. None of that had to happen for future generations. And it needs to be eaten in a hurry. It has to be eaten in a hurry. Masnichem chagurim with their belts on. Because they're in a hurry. Balayla echad, and it had to be eaten during one night. Now the truth is, the Gemara is going to explain this a little bit later. Pesach Daris is also only eaten in one night, but the Yom Tov of Pesach Rishon, meaning that of that first Pesach Mitzrayim, was only for that night. Pesach Daris not called Sheva, but Pesach for future generations is the 7-day holiday. It is not a one-day holiday, and we'll talk about exactly what those details are. Be'ezras Hashem Yisbarach. We're just going to share the link here, so the Chaver can please go and follow along. I think we'll see if that works. Okay. Says the Gemara as follows: Minalan. How do we know this? How do we know these differences between Pesach Mitzrayim and Pesach Daris? The Mishnah doesn't quote any psukim. Says the Gemara, the pasuk says, "Dabru el kol adas b'nei Yisrael lemar." Speak to the entirety of the Jewish people, the congregation of the Jewish people, saying, "Be'asar lachodesh hazeh v'yikhu." The 10th day of this month, they should take a goat or a sheep and bring that as a korban. I mean, be'asar lachodesh hazeh of this month. Zeh mikcha ba'asar. This one, this korban, in this month is going to be taken on the 10th. But for future generations, you do not have to select your Karban Pesach on the 10th day of the month of Nisan. So the Gemara, okay, cool. If that is correct, if that is all true, so that you have to keep it and watch it for 4 days until the 14th of this month. So So here too we should say that this requires, this in Pesach Mitzrayim needs 4 days of checking before it is shechted. But no other korban would require examination for 4 days beforehand. Problem, we're on the first wide line, middle of the line, haven't we learned in the Brisa, Ben Bagbag Omer? This is one of the Brises of Ben Bagbag. He didn't just say Hafach ba Kulaba, he also shows up a few other places in Chas. Ben Bagbag Omer, Minayin letamid. Shetan Bikur Al Yom Shchita. How do you know that every Tamid, every Karban Tamid that was offered twice a day has to have Bikur, has to have 4 days of checking before it is offered? Shenam, the pasuk says, Tishmeru. It says you should watch it. This is the pasuk in Bamidbar. Tzavitz b'nei Shabbat Matad Emes Karbanin Lachmi Leishai Reach Nechichi Tishmeru Lakriv Libi Ma'ado. You have to watch it. You have to guard it. Ulahalan Hu Amir, and then it also says Vayalachem L'Mishmeres Ad Arba Asar, that the Korban Pesach in the days of Mitzrayim had to be watched for 4 days, and the same sherish, the same L'Mishmeres and Tishmeru is used. Malahalan ton bikur dalad yom kadem shchita. Avkan ton bikur dalad yom kadem shchita. The Korban Pesach, the din of bikur by Korban Pesach teaches us, says Ben Bagwag, that for all future generations, every Korban Tamid is going to need bikur. How can you tell me that this is just limited to Pesach Mitzrayim? Maybe it also would then be extended to Pesach Dirshu for all future generations. Shani Hassam says that, well, no, there's a difference there. It applies to Pesach Mitzrayim and it applies to the Korban Tamid. Shani Hassam, it's different. Tishmeru. There it says you should watch it. And that's Xer Shabbat. Pesach Dirshu, Nami Haksiv. But the truth is, but Pesach Dirshu, it also says, you are going to do this service of this month, this service in this month, that every future Pesach that is done should be like it's done now. But what does this hazeh come to teach you? No, it doesn't come to teach you about all future Pesachs. It comes to teach you that there is a relationship between Pesach Mitzrayim, Pesach Dirshu, but lemiute Pesach Sheni dekavase. But it does exclude Pesach Sheni. It excludes Pesach Sheni, which means that Pesach Sheni does not require Bikur Arba Yomim. But Lichara, the Bikur Arba Yomim does exist for all future generations, just not that you need to select it. Meaning you don't need to select it 4 days ahead on the 10th of the month, but every Korban does need Bikur, meaning somehow or another, and Rashi deals with this kasha, how exactly are you going to check something without selecting it necessarily? So Rashi says towards the end of the Rashi, the Kavase says Mashma Bikur Bikur Mekach V'idach Hazem Ma'id Pesach Dirshu Mi Mekach Ba'asar Aval Mi Bikur Ba'arba Yomim Lo B'Ma'id Im Lo Hifrishu Mi Ba'asar Yivaker Shnayim U'Shleisha you don't need to necessarily have selected which one you are going to use. You could have a bunch that you are planning in theory to use, and you have to watch all of them then for 4 days before. Meaning it does require Bikur for 4 days, and that din does apply. It just doesn't apply to Pesach Sheni, but it does apply to Pesach Dirshu. Says the Gemara, okay, fine. If this is in fact true, the pasuk says, you have to eat the meat on this night. So this night, so we say, should we also say that this one has to be eaten at night? But for future generations, it doesn't have to be eaten at night. The pasuk says, you will do this avodah in this month. No, it does. That is consistent. That din is consistent. It's going to carry over, and that we're going to learn from the pasuk about this. You're going to copy and paste this avodah. Ella, okay, fine. So, what else are we going to derive from hazeh? Since we're being medayik on the word hazeh, Ella hazeh lamani. So, why do you need hazeh? Why do you need the word hazeh at all? Meaning, so what do you need hazeh for? You need it because of the dinim of both Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah and Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah, which we're going to see later in Perek Pesachim, and Rabbi Akiva have a different din that they learn from this pasuk, Balayla Hazeh. From the word Balayla Hazeh, Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah tells you that from this pasuk, you're going to learn that the Korban Pesach is eaten until midnight, and Rabbi Akiva is going to use it to explain that it can only be eaten for one night, unlike a shlamim, and that midrabanan you should eat it, you should finish it by midnight. Okay, fine. So let's continue to challenge from all of the psukim that we have, because all of the psukim are very specific, talking about Pesach Mitzrayim. Pasuk says that an uncircumcised person is not allowed to eat it. It. What's it? It meaning Pesach Mitzrayim. So we say the boy enu nechal. So maybe we should say that that boy enu nechal Pesach Mitzrayim, he's not allowed to eat. Aval hu eichel b'matzah umara. Maybe he would be allowed to eat by the matzah and the maror. Meaning, an uncircumcised person is not allowed to eat from the Korban Pesach, but maybe he can eat from the matzah and the maror on Leil Pesach. Now, there's an interesting discussion to talk about here, whether or not maror that comes without Pesach is would be a chiv d'oraisa. There's what to talk about there, and the Rishonim, the Rishonim and the Achronim have a lot to say about this. But meaning that would be the din. Boy eno eichel, meaning that's not coming to tell you that Pesach Doris, an Orel is allowed to eat. No, an Orel is not allowed to eat Pesach, but he is allowed to eat matzah maror, and he's obligated to eat matzah maror. Okay, what about the next pasuk? Ben nechar lo yechal boy. That a ben nechar, that a non-Jew or stranger is not allowed to eat of it. The Mechilta, however, discusses that this doesn't mean a non-Jew, meaning a ben nechar doesn't mean a non-Jew. The Rashi quotes from the Mechilta that the ben nechar is a Jew that has abandoned Yiddishkeit, meaning he's become a heretic. So we say hachanami the boy en eichel aval eichel pesach daris. Maybe a Jew that does not believe in God would not eat Pesach Mitzrayim, meaning you can't have him included in Pesach Mitzrayim, but you could have included in Pesach Daris. The pasuk says, no, copy and paste it. You're going to do this avoda in these months the same way that in Mitzrayim you couldn't give it to somebody that abandoned Yiddishkeit. You can't give it to a heretic for future generations either. So then, what do you need the pasuk for ben nechal boy? So what does that din teach you? Boy hamras das paselas. In that mitzvah, the mitzvah of Korban Pesach, abandoning Yiddishkeit is going to be posel you to eat it. Vein hamras das paselas b'truma, but a kohen that abandons Yiddishkeit is still allowed to eat truma. Meaning, ben nechar lo yochel boy teaches you that a heretic is not allowed to eat Korban Pesach, but he is allowed to eat truma if he would be a kohen. You have a kohen that goes off the derech, he's still allowed to eat truma. You can invite him for truma. V'itzrich lemechtav arel. And now that we have discussed these dinim so far, the Gemara now discusses the fact that we need the pasuk specifically to tell you about an arel. An arel is an interesting case because an arel might be somebody that intentionally didn't get a bris milah, but also could be somebody that didn't get a bris milah because medically he was unable to. For example, the Gemara in Maseches Shabbos discusses that if a person has shnei achim shemesu machmas milah, you have two brothers that died as a result of hemophilia. So they had a bris milah and then they died from a loss of blood. The third brother that's born does not need a bris milah, meaning it's part of a bris milah. The father should not give a bris milah to this child. Because of Pikuach Nefesh. Today, I think they just give them a blood clot and they do the bris milah and everything is okay. But in the days of Chazal, there would be potter from a bris milah, and therefore the Gemara discusses v'itzrich lemechtav arel. The Torah needs to tell you the din of arel. And the Torah also needs to write the din of ben nechar. Because of Rachman Arel, because the Torah only wrote the din of arel mishum demayis. I might have thought that the reason that Arel is not allowed to eat from Korban Pesach is because it's repulsive. Meaning, a person without a bris milah is not physically a Jew b'shleimus. Meaning, it is denigrating. Now, it's a hard thing to wrap our heads around. I suppose in Tashim Bevav that the Torah would be having that it's something that's a davar ma'os. But with the understanding that a person without a bris milah is somebody that is not within the covenant of Avraham Avinu, even if it would be bonus. So maybe we would say to be able to eat from this karban, you need to be somebody that is representative of the bris of Kodesh Baruch Hu with Avraham Avinu. Aval ben nechar loymar. But a person that ben nechar, a person that's abandoned Yiddishkeit, they're not physically repulsive. They might be spiritually repulsive, but they're not physically repulsive. So maybe that's not the case. So tzricha, and therefore the Torah has to tell you the Navara. Vi ashmeinu ben nechar, and if you only would have said ben nechar, if you only would have said ben nechar, mishum de'in liber l'shemaim, because he doesn't want to have a connection with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. Aval Arel the liber l'shemaim, but an Arel that's from, meaning he keeps 612 mitzvahs, except for bris milah, but that's his ba'inus. So maybe you would say that that there's no reason to puzzle him from eating the korban tzricha, and therefore that both of them are necessary. And then the Gemara is now going to challenge further from additional words of boy that seem to insist that it's only about this korban pesach Mitzrayim. So what about the pasuk that a toshav v'sacher, a toshav is a ger toshav is a non-Jew that keeps Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach and lives in Eretz Yisrael. That's called the ger toshav v'sacher, and a hired laborer, but meaning not an eved, somebody that you hire. He's your employee. Lo yachal bay, he shouldn't eat it. So he's not Jewish, and he's a hired help, meaning your housekeeper. They're not allowed to eat it. So hachanami the boy eno oichel abal oichel b'pesach daris. Maybe this one, meaning Pesach Mitzrayim, they wouldn't be able to eat from, but Pesach daris they would be able to eat it. It's an interesting consideration. Meaning, even the Havamina that the Jews in Mitzrayim had like a ger toshav, they had non-Jews that believed in Sheva Mitzvah B'nai Noach that were like part of their households, and a sacher that they had hired help. It's an interesting consideration, but at least theoretically, the consideration is that maybe that one you're not allowed to eat, but future ones you would be allowed to. So Amakra, the pasuk therefore says, the same pasuk once again, copy and paste. No. The same way that it would be also then Pesach Mitzrayim, it's also for future generations as well. Ela boy lamali. So what does it say? Boy. So what does that boy come to teach me? That in that I'm not allowed to give my toshav and sachir. So say boy hamras das v'selas. Not there. Being a heretic would be postal him from eating from the korban. Vein hamras das v'selas v'truma. And once again, hamras das is not going to postal v'truma. Rashi questions whether or not this line of the Gemara is accurate. We've already learned this din. Maybe this whole thing is a mistake. So that's meaning the Elameata. Rashi thinks might be all meaning incorrect within this statement. So maybe this whole line should be taken out, but nevertheless, it seems to be re-emphasizing the same din that by Hamras Das is Pasalas, but it's not Pasalas Petrol. Ata. So then, what are you going to learn from Umalta Usa Az by? Once you give him Bismillah, then he can eat it. So he says, so this one he cannot eat, but he can eat Pesel Daris. Maybe that's what it means. Once you give him bris milah, malta osai, give him bris milah, as yochel boy, then he can eat it. So the boy this one he cannot eat until gets bris milah, but maybe he can eat the rest of them. Amar Crow, the pasuk says once again, Avata, the same pasuk Avata that copy and paste from Pesach Mitzrayim to Pesach Daris. Ela boy lamali. So why do you need the word boy in as yochel boy? Just say as yochel. So why do you need boy? Boy milas sachar v'avadav. Because if you didn't give your children or your slaves a bris milah, then they would not be allowed to eat Karm Pesach. But if you didn't give your sons or your avadim a bris milah, they would still be allowed to eat truma. Meaning that is not going to be ma'akev in truma. However, the din is that the kohen himself has to have a bris milah in order to eat truma. He might, if he has a bris milah and he has given up on Yiddishkeit completely, he can still eat truma as long as he has a bris milah. Apparently, there is a din of maus, meaning you cannot have somebody without a bris milah eating truma. But from now, the pasuk says ve'etzem lo yishburu by, right? That a ve'etzem lo yishburu by, which is by Pesach Sheni. You're not allowed to break a bone in it. So we say, maybe by Tosus asked the question, why are we asking this question from Pesach Sheni? Tosus asked the question, Tema l'riva, amay itzrich lehachi v'avata, given the Pesach Sheni, ve'etzem lo yishbru by, kol sheken berishin. He leaves it as an open question. Why are we even entertaining the possibility that this would only be true by Pesach Sheni? So, meaning the possible Pesach Sheni, ve'esem lo yishbru by, that by would only mean by Pesach Sheni you wouldn't be allowed to break a bone. The pasuk says that you should do this avodah in this month. So ela boy lamali. So why do we need the word boy over here? So boy kasher v'lo b'pasuk. Now the word boy comes to teach me here that there's only an issur of breaking the bone of a Pesach that is kosher, but there's no issur of breaking the bone of a Pesach that is a puzzle, and this is what we had seen in Daf Pei Gimel a few blat ago. Ela me'ata, but from now, the pasuk says, Al tachlu mimenu na, Al tachlu mimenu na, don't eat from it, partially cooked, partially roasted. Since but from it you cannot eat. But maybe you can eat it partially roasted in future generations. The pasuk says, no. Once again, copy and paste. You're going to learn from Pesach Mitzrayim to Pesach Daris. But from now, what about sorry? So why does it say don't eat from it? So what do we learn from that? From why does it have to emphasize from it? The Rabba Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, for the din of Rabba in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak. Rashi points out what is the din of Rabba in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak. So that Rashi says, in Perek Ha'arel in Yibam Sayin Dalad, never mimenu b'Pesach, v'never mimenu b'Maiser. That there's a gzera shav mimenu from Pesach to Maiser. Malahalan Arel also b'Pesach, af kan Arel also b'Maiser. No, that word mimenu is coming to tell you that an Arel is also not allowed to eat Maiser. The next line. So far we have challenged all of these dinim, and we've seen that the Mishnah holds up. The next line of the Mishnah, the Pesach Mitzrayim had to be eaten in a hurry. Says the Gemara Minalan, how do you know that they had to be eaten in a hurry? The pasuk says, you have to eat in a hurry. That one needs to be eaten in a hurry. Rashi says, and future ones do not. They do not need to be eaten in a hurry. And Pesach will continue with Pesach Daris Neg Kol Shiva. We'll see those dinim Pesach Mizbarach tomorrow as we get to the final Mishnayos of the Perek. In a couple of days' time, we will be beginning the 10th and final Perek of Maseches Pesachim, and looking forward to making a push from then until Pesach. We'll put out the posters and the flyers. People to sign up, please feel free to share so that everybody will be able to join and be part of this exciting new venture. And looking forward to seeing everybody tomorrow. Have a wonderful day.